Well, why don't we dive in? Um, Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Um, Terry, why don't you stick on that first slide for a moment? I just want to orient people to this discussion, which we're super excited to have, and I think is going to be a really interesting one. First, I'm Ted Sturdivant with the Center for Sustainable Infrastructure in Olympia. I'm the director of strategic initiatives there. And we are working on a clean materials agenda that I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. And that work led us to a really wonderful partnership with the Clean Tech Alliance in putting on a conversation series over the course of this year, really exploring the idea of helping a clean materials sector of our industry emerge in the Northwest that can really drive change, sort of positive change toward a clean economy for the coming years. So this is the second in that discussion series. The first one was really laying the groundwork for the proposition and how we might follow in the footsteps of clean energy with clean materials. And I just want to thank our partners at the Clean Tech Alliance. This conversation series is going to continue in September and October, and it's going to culminate in an in-person summit in November. So we're just really starting this work over the course of the year. And today we want to focus on the micro enterprises in particular. And I want to thank our sponsors who are helping make this happen. The City of Spokane, Metro down in the Portland region, Department of Ecology, Seattle Public Utilities, our lovely new partner, the Washington State Micro Enterprise Association, City of Tacoma, and the Department of Commerce is a sponsor for this event. Okay, Terry, let's go to the next one. Just give you a quick orientation for our morning. I'll talk a little bit about clean materials, and Lisa Smith will talk a little bit about micro enterprises just to orient us to what we're talking about here. Then we'll hear from a couple of actual folks who are doing micro enterprise in the clean materials space, just so we get a sense of who are we talking about here. And then we're going to have a really nice roundtable discussion exploring some questions about how can we advance micro enterprises participation in clean materials. We'll do a breakout session, and then we'll come back and report out from that and wrap up. Okay, next slide, Terry. So let me talk a little bit about CSI, the Center for Sustainable Infrastructure. We do, one of the things that we do are what we call Northwest Blueprints, where we try to present a vision for where we might go over the course of the next 20 years. So these are focused on 2040, trying to envision the kind of future we want to see. And it's based on the notion that we spend just a ton of money every year on infrastructure, probably more than anything else. And, our proposition is if we're smart and thoughtful about that money, we could get probably a whole lot more out of it in building the kind of future we want to. So we bring long range strategic thinking and systems thinking to these questions so that we can get sort of smarter spending of all that money on infrastructure and better outcomes for the future we want. The first report was about infrastructure, sustainable infrastructure generally. Then there was an energy report, then a water report, and now just last year we did the clean materials report, which came out of this question, which is, we faced a real crisis in recycling and waste management. And so CSI posed the question, and Reese Roth, the director, did this work over the course of a year and a half. What would a world-class waste and recycling system look like by 2040? Okay, next slide, Terry. And so we came up with the Clean Materials Report that came out last June. Great. And the notion there is simply that we were really running into a wall with the old waste paradigm. And these challenges in particular drove this question in this report. We all saw the collapse of the export markets for recycled materials, a realization that waste prevention just wasn't really working. Our waste, the amount of waste we make isn't going down. And that was supposed to be the number one sort of strategy of the old paradigm. Just radical changes in packaging and components of the waste stream, and also a new recognition that this isn't just about waste, it's about what happens before stuff becomes waste. Next slide, Terry. So I just want to highlight a couple things out of that report. One of them being this learning, which is represented by this figure, which came from the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. And basically what this says is that, at least in terms of the climate impacts from our stuff, and we've heard a lot about how waste contributes to climate change. This shows that the climate impacts from stuff, the vast majority of it happens upstream of when we toss it. So that 0.5% is that tiny fraction is what the climate impacts are of just waste management. So it says, boy, we got to look at the whole supply chain, from production, from sourcing to production to transportation to use. There's all these climate impacts and emissions embedded in there that we need to start to get at. And Bill Gates recently said that the manufacturing sector represents about 31% of the climate problem and is a really hard to get at sector. So this is one way that we're trying to help get at that challenging sector. Next slide, Terry. The other key challenge we want to highlight out of that report is just how toxic our economy is and how many toxic constituents are in various products that we don't really have much knowledge of or control over. There was just a report the other day about the amount of persistent bioaccumulative toxics in makeup, I believe. So that we know more and more about that problem. It's a big problem, and it's part of the driver here. Okay, next slide, Terry. So that just led to this vision that the report offers, which is to build that infrastructure and economy by 2040 that both shrinks our environmental and public health footprint dramatically while creating tens of thousands of good jobs. So that's really the proposition that led us to this conversation series. And one more word about CSI is we see integration and sort of symbiosis or synergy, or however you want to say that, as a key tool for sort of addressing our challenges in the 21st century. And with infrastructure projects specifically, with policies as well, we like to ask ourselves, okay, so we're doing this. Now let's ask ourselves, well, in doing this, if we're thoughtful and smart about what else is important, what else is needed, what else can we get done? What else might we achieve in doing this work? And as a result, come up with, instead of sort of single solutions to single problems, we think the world is calling for, multiple solutions to these challenges so that we gain as much ground as we can through our work and through our investments. So with this clean materials work, we think has a really clear economic and environmental value proposition. The question of how can we, beyond just creating tens of thousands of good jobs, how can we be as intentional as we can about this benefiting people? And that was answered in part when Lisa Smith, who is the executive director of the Washington State Micro Enterprise Association, knocked on our door and said, hey, you guys are doing this clean materials work. We love it. Can we work together so that the smallest businesses, so micro enterprises are defined as 5 employees or fewer, can participate, can contribute, can benefit from this work, rather than sort of leaving them out or them being an afterthought. And as we sort of had that conversation, we thought, wow, this just adds so much value to this clean materials work. So it's my great pleasure now to turn it over to Lisa Smith, who I've admired her work at the Enterprise for Equity in Olympia for many years, and now with the association. So, and you know, she's one of those people that when Lisa says, "Hey, I think this is a good idea," you know, I just do it, because she just does wonderful work in this state. So Lisa, let me turn it over to you, and you can tell us about the microenterprise world.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. And thank you, Ted, for your leadership, and Reese Roth and your work with the Center for Sustainable Infrastructure, as well as the Clean Tech Alliance. We're very fortunate to partner with you today. I also want to just give a warm welcome and appreciation to the Department of Commerce. Their funding to our organization would never, our work would not be possible without the Department of Commerce. And I also want to do a shout out to Senator Das, her leadership and that of many senators and House representatives found in their sites the power of microenterprise and made sure that there's funding and support for the work that we do. And so I'm super grateful to be here. For those of you who are not really clear, WSMA, or the Washington State Microenterprise Association, is really focused on helping the nonprofits in our state. There's over 60 of them who are working with the smallest businesses. Our nonprofits work with limited resource entrepreneurs, businesses owned by Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, people with disabilities, rural entrepreneurs. And so these nonprofits, day in and day out, walk these folks through the process of writing a business plan or providing business technical assistance. And many of them offer very small microloans up to $25,000. And what we know is that when these nonprofits in our state have the resources they need, the tools, then they can help the very smallest businesses thrive. And so our dream with partnering with TED and others here is that our connection with these organizations may help our nonprofits on the ground assist more businesses to not only become thriving economically, but thriving ecologically, knowing what their impact is on the planet and their value in the community. So I just wanted to make sure that you got a link to our website. Go check us out there. The other part for us is we want to lower the barriers to business ownership. When folks can own their own business, they own their future. And ways of getting there are many. But starting a small business is a key essential piece for equity and leveling the playing field. Another hope that we have is that we're going to be able to provide access to training in the future by these partners for microenterprise development organizations in the field. Hopefully, we'll be able to open up procurement opportunities. Right now, large contracts are there for very large corporations, but we haven't really been able to graduate the size of these bidding opportunities for the very smallest businesses. And so we want to work more closely with OMWBE, Office of Minority Women-Owned Business, and others so that we can create more meaningful and frequent opportunities for the very small businesses to compete. And finally, we want to help these small businesses that are growing green, that are sustainable, get the access to financing, whether it's through local investment networks or microloans or conventional lenders. We want to make sure that the financing piece is there. And I'm excited that Jesse is here from rural Washington, and all of the speakers. You're all rock stars. And I look forward to the discussion. Thank you again.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, well, let's get into it. So first, we thought it'd be helpful just to hear brief stories of who are we talking about when we talk about micro enterprises. So I want to introduce Yumiko and Jesse to talk a little bit about what they do. Yumiko Damashek is a board member with the Refugee Artisans Initiative in Seattle. She's a seasoned senior executive in the global semiconductor industry, where she has broken numerous glass ceilings in a very competitive industry. She's lectured over the years on foreign investment strategies, women's career and leadership development, and has been very active in diversity and inclusion initiatives in the corporate setting, and now contributes her great wealth of talent through in addressing social issues through nonprofit organizations. She does angel investing. She volunteers with high school STEM students. And we're just really lucky to have Yumiko. So Yumiko, let me ask you to go first and just tell us a little bit about RAI so that folks get a sense of what you guys do there.
Great, thank you, Ted. I'm Yumiko Damashek. I'm a board member of Refugee Artisan Initiative. We are located in Lake City, one of the most diverse communities in the state, in the city of Seattle. And our organization is run by 5 very powerful women, supported by 8 very powerful all-women board members. And some of us are immigrants or children of immigrants ourselves. Since we started our operation about 4 years ago, we have trained and supported over 45 refugee women and their families. Our mission is to partner with the refugee and immigrant women to foster their inclusive and prosperous transition into the United States through artisan skills training and small batch manufacturing. And behind that, we have 3 basic guiding principles. The first is the participation into the sustainability. We accept donations of materials from various corporations, and our talented artisans, refugee artisans, turn them into beautiful, high quality products that the society needs. And in that process, we participate in the abatement of landfill. The second is workforce development. Our goal is to provide economic pathways to refugee women so that they can be financially independent and also become active and contributing members of the society they participate in. Those women are micro business owners, and we're not sweatshops, and we pay living wages to all of them, and we're really proud of that. And the third element is our willingness to work with other like-minded organizations to create an ecosystem so that we can amplify our impact together and push our advocacy together. So 2020 was a perfect year to demonstrate that the validity of our business model. When COVID hit, we were sitting on a pile of clean bed sheets that were donated by California Design Den. And at that time, the domestically manufactured high quality cotton masks were not quite available. So we pivoted all our resources and started churning out thousands of masks. And in fact, we created over 80,000 masks and sold many of them, but we also donated thousands of masks to the vulnerable populations, including the first responders, the medical workers, people experiencing homelessness, incarcerated people, you name it. And as a result, we got a lot of attention from the media of various kinds, and also got some awards. So it was a really great year for us, but we also knew that 2020 was a year of aberration. There was nothing normal about the year, and we knew that we needed to secure several government and corporate contracts going into 2021 to continue growing and continue supporting our refugee women. So we again pivoted our resources this time to medical scrubs, and we started working with hospital systems, the insurance companies, even pharmaceutical companies to get some attention. And we've got some limited success, but I have to say it has been an uphill battle. They all appreciate and embrace the value propositions we bring to the table. But at the end of the day, they have their existing supply chains, and they have to hit their cost targets. So, our value propositions and what they're looking for are not exactly well aligned. And we feel that the missing link can be social procurement. We are a big proponent of social procurement, and we're hoping that social procurement movement can be somehow integrated into this clean material initiative so that we can push the envelope together and transform the supply chain and create some systemic changes. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to today's discussion.
Well, that's a great example of just the value of this conversation. We've been working on clean materials, but didn't even know the term social procurement until a few days ago. So thank you, Yumiko. Let's turn now to Jesse, who owns Foss Stump Grinding on the Olympic Peninsula and is both kind of a veteran of some of those resources that Lisa talked about, that was available to help him get his business going, and is kind of living out sustainability through his business out on the peninsula. So Jesse, tell us a little bit about yourself and your business.
All right. A little bit of backstory. I've kind of lived around the peninsula my whole life, and economically it's pretty kind of crappy ever since the timber industry kind of fell apart. And so back when I was 23, 24, I moved out of here and moved up to a Monroe area for doing work up there, doing HVAC install, and ended up unfortunately getting in a nasty car accident with a drunk driver, and kind of put me had to rethink life a little bit. And so I ended up moving back home a few years later, and kind of trying to figure out the proper way to make a living out here again. And one thing I learned before was tree stump grinding. I did that for a couple of years. It was kind of a fun thing to do, and it was something physically I could do with my certain disabilities I have. And so, being where I live out here, though, you got to drive a long ways for all your economic, for all your work. Whether it's Aberdeen or Seattle or Tacoma, Olympia. And so I went, tried to get a hold of whoever I could in the state to kind of help me out with funding for this kind of stuff. And one way or another, I got pushed back towards Enterprise for Equity. And they had a thing going on here, and I went to that, and they showed me quite a bit of stuff about how to properly run a business and look at all the different aspects of it and all that as well. And I did that for a little while, and I think I went through the first class of it, whatever, learned a lot, graduated. They helped me out, started my business doing stump grinding, and did a full year of that, kind of learned the ins and outs of what the business was. And then I think by year 2, I was kind of ready to upgrade my business, get some better machinery to do things a little more efficiently, and went through them again for another one of their class things, and ended up getting a $10,000 loan through them, which helped me get a better machine and kind of make my business kind of explode that much more. And so it really made a big difference to me through that. I will say one of the things that helped me out for where I am, because I say my commute for all my work is considerably long. So one way or another, I've learned how to make biodiesel over the years, and it allows me to get all of my fuel from all the local companies here in Lake Quinault, all the used vegetable oil. And I did that for a couple of years, and that, if for as much as I drive, that's a huge thing for saving, literally, cutting your fuel costs in half, which is thousands of dollars every year for me. And I learned as well to make things like soap out of the byproduct of making biodiesel, which is one of those things that when you meet a customer, they wonder why your truck smells like it does, because it's burning veggie oil, and you get a big long conversation with them and give them some soap made from that as well. And that's a fun thing to do. And it also kind of helped me kind of, I don't know, kind of push people back in this direction, explain about how beautiful the rainforest place is out here, and all things they could do out here and help push the economy here as well, even though the economy is kind of cruddy at times, but can help do what I could to help push it out here. And so I'm on, this is year 5 for me in my business, and things are looking pretty good. The way things, the way the economy has gone lately. So
I think, listen to Jesse. When we think about these businesses, we can think, oh wow, these are really small, and should we be instead focused on Amazon and people that can sort of drive big change with the stroke of a pen. But think about how many of these businesses are out there in every community all across the state, and to have more and more of them, instead of burning polluting diesel fuel, burning non-polluting biodiesel, and just the sort of conversations that Jesse has with folks out there. So just think about the collective impact of this sector, and it's really big. So next, let's move on to the next part of our agenda. Super grateful to have Senator Mona Doss joining us from a very much needed family vacation in the wake of a really big and challenging legislative session this year. I want to introduce our roundtable panelists here, and then starting with Senator Doss, we'll get into the conversation. And normally I don't like to read too much sort of bios, but I just love this part of the senator's story, that she was born to Indian parents who immigrated to America's Rust Belt with only $6 in their pockets, but full of hope about building a better life here. And so I think that's a pretty, one of the ways in which she brings a really wonderful and relevant perspective to this conversation. She's a senator for the 47th district, has been a real champion in both clean materials and the microenterprise community. She has a bachelor's degree in psychology and an MBA in sustainable business. And for 15 years has operated her own mortgage business. So she has that perspective as well as a small business owner, and has centered her career around sustainable development, equal access to housing, and empowering marginalized voices, all of which just makes her perfectly suited for this conversation. And probably most important, she is the proud auntie to 2 nephews, and hopefully she's getting to spend some time with them. Next, I want to introduce Rochelle Ames, who is the Senior Director for Commercialization and Outreach with our partners, the Clean Tech Alliance. Rochelle is passionate about helping business founders effectively communicate their products, their company, to partners, investors, stakeholders. She directs the commercialization programming and for the CTA and the Washington and Canadian portion of the Cascadia Clean Tech Accelerator, which is a business training program for startups. So she brings really great sort of startup and commercialization perspective to this. And I was told I had to give a shout out to her 2 cats and to the Cougs, the Hawks, the M's, and the Warriors, most of which I'm on board with. I don't know about that last one, but next I want to introduce Kathleen Kinney, who's a board member with the Spokane Independent Metro Business Alliance, or SIMBA. And she's also the founder of Biomethane LLC. She works with municipal wastewater facilities on sort of alternatives to dealing with their biogas, and really helps them get, save money and get better outcomes through that work, and sort of working up and down the full value chain, from equipment suppliers to environmental credit buyers. So Kathleen just brings wonderful experience to this conversation as well. Next, I want to introduce Nico Onoda McGuire with the Seattle Good Business Network. They're doing really cool work in this space. And she manages their sustainability and youth programs and particularly circular economy. And her previous work includes community outreach and watershed restoration, program development. She's got a BA in urban sustainability from Seattle University. And her work is really all about her passion for sustainable urban growth and environmental equity, and works in service to a vibrant local economy that is critical in building that circular economy. And finally, I'm really pleased to have Moji Egan she was a board member with Zero Waste Washington, and also the founder of Blue Daisy Consulting, which helps small businesses intertwine their desires to care for the planet and to be a successful business. So again, spot on to this conversation. She has a bachelor's in mechanical engineering, worked for years as a quality engineer in the construction industry, and has brought all that experience to helping businesses, push past that frustration and overwhelm of getting started. And all of that adds up to making her a compassionate and creative strategist who is always learning. So with that wonderful lineup of people that we're so happy to have, let's talk. Let's have a conversation about this fundamental premise, which is, how can we move forward in a way that advances this clean materials economy and really maximizes the ability for small businesses to contribute to that, and benefit from that, and their communities along with them. So I want to start with a question that is specifically for Senator Doss. As I said, you bring a really unique and valuable perspective to this conversation. And as a policymaker, and someone who's a champion of both clean materials and micro enterprise, as we start on this learning mission, this learning journey together about this proposition, the ultimate aim really is to come up with ideas as well as sort of collective strength in our voices that help make it easier for you and your colleagues to pass the kind of good policies that help with these two missions. So given all of that, and these various perspectives that all intersect here that you bring to bear, just what perspectives or advice would you have to offer to all of us as we start this conversation?
Well, thank you, everyone. I've lost my voice. I've been working a lot, which means talking on the phone. I want to just thank Lisa and Ted for the invitation today. I am passionate about many things, micro enterprise, business. As you mentioned, I have an MBA in sustainable business. I want to share that it's from Pinchot University, and there are actually 6 of us grads on this call today. So shout out to Kathleen Kinney, my fellow panelist, Cindy Brooks, Jason Puricow, Rick Dixon, and Mike Skinner's Center for Inclusive Entrepreneurship was housed at Pinchot University for many years. So he didn't graduate from there, but 6 of us tied to the school on this one call of 46 people is a pretty large percentage, and just shows you what the education did for me and for all of us on this call. Also really excited to see fellow rebel rousers, Katie Hall and Paula Sardinas. Together, we helped elect 4 Black women to the legislature last year, and I will talk about what an impact that had. And then always my partner in crime, Heather Trim, partner in good crime and good trouble. She and I pass all the zero waste bills that I pass are because of Heather's leadership and Zero Waste Washington. And then I just wanted to also shout out Amanda Hubrick, who's on this call, who is works in the legislature and is running this year for office. And I'm just really proud of that you stepped up, Amanda. So I come from a long line of rebel rousers, entrepreneurs. My family came here from India, as you mentioned, with $6 and a dream for a better life. People say to me all the time, you work so hard, and when are you going to take a break? And people that look like me have never been in power. And so finally, when I have an opportunity to make a change and make a difference and bring a different, literally, voice, since I've lost mine, to the table, I can't stop working. People like me and Paula and Katie Hall and I'm going to say your name wrong. I'm sorry, Yumko. We have been fighting, grasping, clawing our way to get to this place where we can make a difference, where money doesn't matter. I don't take corporate money. I never will. And that's really what ruins politics in my mind. Present company included, because I love Paula, but many of the lobbyists make $100,000 to $200,000 a month. You heard that correctly, a month. And if you don't think that influences what happens in the halls of Olympia, or in this case, on the interwebs, you are mistaken. I fought the dairy industry, Heather Trim's secret, didn't think I could do it and win. I won. I fought the styrofoam industry. I fought the plastics industry. We worked together collaboratively with the beverage industry, and we no longer will have styrofoam in the state of Washington. It's going to be a banned product in a couple years. We banned plastic bags. One thing I learned at Pinchot University, or BGI, Bainbridge Graduate Institute, which is what we used to call it, is I learned how to be a systems thinker. I mean, I think I always was one, but I have a name for it. Big picture thinker. How does one thing affect the other thing? And that's really what I bring to the legislature, which is a really unique perspective in my mind. We solve problems in the legislature in silos: housing affordability, environment, technology, education, healthcare. I'm sure I'm not the first person to tell you all those things are tied together. And so when you bring a systems thinker and you elect different people, guess what? You get different results. And I'm so tired of listening to people say, wow, you guys got so much done this year. And they're scratching their head. Look who we elected in the last 3 years. Lisa Wellman flipped a seat. Mongadingra flipped the Senate. Me, Claire, and Emily flipped 3 seats, and Tawana flipped a seat. You think us 6 women haven't made a difference in the legislature, in the Senate? It is a difference, because when you elect different people, you get different results, period. And this year, I worked so hard last year to elect 4 Black women. Those women are April Berg, Representative Berg, Kirsten Harris-Talley, Jamila Taylor, and oh my gosh, I'm forgetting someone. Oh, Tawana Nobles, I've already mentioned Tawana. So those 4 women came, and a few years ago, I called my colleagues racist, sexist, misogynistic, and full of hate. And it was in 300 newspapers. And this year, everyone knows that the legislature is a systemically oppressed organization, like every organization. It's rooted in racism, it's rooted in oppression. And until you shine a light on those things, and until you bring people like me that aren't afraid to speak it out loud, you're not going to get change. And so now we're having conversations about race inequity. I passed 3 bills having to do with anti-racism this year. Jesse Johnson, Rep. Entenman, my seatmate, we all passed huge bills about racial inequities. Do you think those things would have happened if we hadn't all been elected? The answer is no. Paula can tell you. The answer is no. It also wouldn't have happened if George Floyd hadn't been murdered. So when you start to see these things and you start to wonder why Washington is so special, and we are, I speak regularly to people across the country, their legislatures are not as functional as ours. We got a lot done, but instead of scratching your head, please know it's because different people are at the table. That's why we got a lot done. We also had amazing advocates like Paula Sardinas and her husband, Albert, who are advocating for the right things. Their organization is really been hand in hand with many of us legislators. So Paula, I want to publicly thank you and Albert for all your hard work to make sure this legislation gets passed and that we shine a light on the inequities. And it's really hard to ignore the inequities when you have people like Senator Tawana Nobles and myself and many of the others I mentioned, because we're at the table now. And I ran on a principle that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And people like me have been on the menu for far too long. And that's why I ran. That's why I work 10, 15 hours a day, because I can't stop and I won't stop. So that's a little bit about me.
Well, thank you for getting us going. It's encouraging just to hear how some things are happening and we're able to pass some good stuff, and maybe more and more of that. And I'm also going to, in advance, make apologies for the senator. She was really kind to jam us into her schedule and is probably going to drop off before the end of the event. So, but let's use her while we got her. So now I just want to throw this question out, and Yumiko and Jesse, please consider yourselves part of this panel, and want to hear everyone's thoughts. Why do we even need this conversation in the first place? If opportunities, if the market is moving toward people wanting clean materials, why can't we just say, oh, that's great, business will follow and respond to the market conditions? What is it about the micro enterprise sector that sort of calls for this conversation and for us to be intentional about barriers and how to get around those? And I'm going to start with Kathleen, who's got her hand up.
Yes, I think I can say something to that. And gosh, I'm so jazzed just hearing Ranadas speak. Thank you. Referring to something Lisa said earlier about business ownership, meaning that people own their futures. I want to build on that and describe how, we know that if there's an owner living in their own house, that house is going to be kept up better. And if we want to have our cities kept up and really be able to thrive, we need to have the people who live there own the businesses in them. And if we want to see that kind of structural change region-wide, it means we need multiple cities across the region that allow that. And speaking as a board member of SIMBA, Spokane Independent Metro Business Alliance, what we do is really try to put a focal point, a forum, a kind of binding medium for all of these local businesses to come together. And it's something that has to be locally done just by its nature, so that those businesses have a voice at the table. Because if you have scattered small local businesses, they're worried about how do they get their payroll met? How do they bring on their next client? They don't have the bandwidth or the funding to be able to sit down and really move the needle and pass initiatives at the regulatory level that are going to help their communities to really thrive. So to be able to bring those voices together, for instance, myself as a small business owner now have a place at this table, and we're having this conversation because SIMBA exists. And I can speak more about how that's made a difference in my business later, but just to get the ball rolling on that point.
Other thoughts on this question, and and just the particular barriers that these smallest of our businesses face because of their size? And I'm thinking about what Yumiko said earlier about procurement and just the interface between these very small companies and this sort of much larger dynamic supply chain that we're trying to clean up. What are some other barriers that we should be mindful of as we do this work? Who wants to dive in? Rochelle, thank you.
Hi, everybody. Rochelle Ames from the Clean Tech Alliance. I'm really proud to be on this panel and excited to actually learn from all of these other panelists as well today. But I'm going to come at it with a slightly different lean. I'm coming at it with small businesses in mind, but also clean technology and sustainable businesses as well. And so with that lens, we know that creating products that have a sustainability side or clean technology, they take a lot more inputs in terms of funding and support and product development than technologies that may just be software. And not to say that software can't be related to clean technology. We have a lot of folks within our ecosystem that do a software that helps the clean technology sector and clean energy and sustainability. But really it's about finding those funding opportunities, as well as the resources and connections to help you get that business off the ground. And I think that's applicable to a lot of micro businesses as well, and micro enterprises, is that you do need more funding and you don't have as much access to that funding and to those resources. So how can we bring more resources to those companies and make sure that they know about them? We're constantly trying to do events like this just to make sure that we get out our resources and make more connections. So I encourage anybody who is interested in learning more about the resources that both the Clean Tech Alliance has, as well as those within our ecosystem, please feel free to make an appointment to connect with me. I'll put my Calendly link in here, but also want to cede my time to everyone else on this panel and learn from you all.
Jump in, yeah. So I definitely come at this from a few different perspectives, not only from representing Zero Waste Washington today on the policy side, but also as an individual who cares about consuming as sustainably as possible. And then in addition, in the consulting work that I do with small businesses. And so I love that we're having this conversation, because on the small business side of things, I noticed that there are always so many trade-offs that are constantly being weighed back and forth that often frustrate small business owners in general, but also people that I get to work with. And so there are limitations from, you were saying earlier, just capacity, just having the time and energy to research all the different options. It may be budget. Oftentimes, quote unquote, sustainable materials cost more or are an upcharge. There are order minimums that often can't be met. There are, one client had an issue with just training. They wanted to make a change, but they would have to retrain their entire manufacturing team, and that's not in their budget. And so weighing all those trade-offs often gets frustrating. And so finding ways to address all of those barriers, either through funding or through collaborative efforts is a super helpful way to get through some of those things.
I want to cue off of this and dive a little deeper into what seems to me to be a really kind of tough and important question here. So you both spoke a bit to the kind of extra challenges that businesses face in starting up and getting going as a sort of clean business, or a clean materials business. Given the nature of what we think of as clean, given the fact that that's a dynamic, it's a moving thing, right? As we learn more, it's like, oh, apparently that's a problem, or oh, apparently we should have designed that differently, or there's new technologies to solve things, but those technologies cost money, and who has the money? And as we're looking for people to be, clean in this kind of comprehensive way, how can we support businesses that are trying to do that, as our knowledge is constantly changing about, well, what does contribute to climate change? Well, what is toxics in our products? And what about recycling products that have toxics in them? Is that good? Is that bad? How do you do it safely without, sort of making the circular economy toxic? And how do we do that without requiring these small businesses that, as Moji just said, have these very real capacity constraints and always will because of they're small? How do we help them not just get in, but stay in the clean materials business without requiring them to become experts in chemistry or climate accounting or supply chain transparency? And this may not be a question with great answers yet, but I think that's part of what we're here to figure out. So who wants to take a stab at that question? Nico.
Hi, Ted. Thank you. Yes, Nico from Seattle Good Business Network here. We work with thousands of local independent businesses across the region, and one of our programs, who RAI is a part of, Seattle Made, we work with over 650 manufacturers in business, 80% of whom are micro enterprises and 70% of whom are women and BIPOC owned. And I just want to second and thank Moji and Michelle and Kathleen for all the points they made. I would just second that and add to, one of the solutions we're exploring through one of our new initiatives with the Washington Materials Marketplace, which is a new tool we're exploring to help B2B material transactions to help waste prevention efforts and reuse, the reuse economy. We're finding that, we're finding challenges in drawing these expectations around building an inclusive, vibrant local economy without providing that long-term support and subsidies, in particular when it comes to emerging opportunities like participating in a circular economy. It really does take deliberate support in helping businesses explore all those options. And so what we're trying to do with the marketplace is embed a sort of very tailored wraparound support, sort of circular business design services that really help those businesses sort of dissect every part of their supply chain logistics to their input and output, and even help explore circular product design. We've hosted a couple pilots, one with REI on their, I think the candle pilot that they had recently, which was inspiring. And so definitely kind of those, I think longer term support that does help bring interagency collaboration into the mix and providing those consulting services. And so that's just one of the ways we're kind of coming into that fight with.
Does anyone else want to address that question?
Yeah, first I want to say that I'm here today in my personal capacity, not my official capacity as a senator, as I've been talking about things. So I really want to just share that. And you asked me a question earlier, which I want to answer, which is about what you all can do to help legislation that you care about get pushed through the Senate and the legislature and the House. It's really just to be loud. And if you think you're being loud, you're not. So be louder. That looks like setting up meetings with your state reps, either reps or senators. It looks like sending emails, getting all your friends to send emails. The form emails, I'm just going to be honest, my office treats them with a form response. You send a canned email, we send you a canned response. If you write a personal email, we read it and we respond. And if it needs to be elevated to me, then I read it as well and reply. And as loud as you think you're being, you're not being loud enough. Getting you and your 50 friends together is great. Getting 500 friends together that care about the same stuff that you care about and coming to Olympia or scheduling a meeting with us. You only get 15-minute meetings with us legislators during session. During the interim, I usually have half-hour, 45-minute meetings. So that's the time to reach out to folks during the interim. And for those of you who don't know what that means, that's when we're not in session. Our sessions are 105 days, and every other year they're 60 days. So we're not there very much. And so really reaching out to us over the interim, either by email or a lot of legislators secretly look at their Facebook messengers. So I'll just share that tidbit and reach out to us, please. The ideas that I get for 3 of the bills I passed this year out of 6 were ideas from others, from my constituents, from my friends, and from my community. So please let us know what legislation is needed to make your lives easier. That's my job. I don't know what other legislators do, but that's my job, is to remove obstacles to get you to do all of the good that you're doing in the world. And I just want to thank you personally from the bottom of my heart. The work that you do makes my work easier. The louder you are, the easier it is for me to convince my colleagues to do the right thing. We learned a quadruple bottom line, which is people, planet, profit in that order, and then purpose. And for me, purpose is spirituality, or why I do things. I'm not a religious person, but I believe in a higher being. And I don't have kids, but I have nephews who are 5 and 7. And literally everything I do is to make sure their future isn't full of garbage, like the Mad Max movies that I watched in the 80s. So, please reach out to me. I will put my phone number and my email address in the chat. I'm extremely accessible, as many of you know. Lisa caught me in Austin, and now I'm in Florida. But even though I'm traveling, I'm working quite a bit. And I'm really here to make sure your ideas get elevated. That's why I was elected. That's why I will continue to do the work I do. And again, just thank you all for your advocacy, because it is getting louder and people are starting to hear zero waste. People are starting to hear things like climate accounting. Ted, that was a new term for me. So I just texted my friend who wanted me to bring a bill about sustainability accounting. So now obviously it needs to be called climate accounting, which is way more powerful, thanks to that tip. So I'm always listening and learning. And again, thank you all for what you're doing. And I'll just end with one last thing about COVID, which my family came here with $6. So I have to be an optimist. I have no other choice. And one of the things about COVID, there was obviously a lot of terrible things and a lot of unnecessary folks lost their lives and families shattered forever. However, as an optimist, what I see is that every sector of every industry was forced to innovate in 4 days, in a week, then you got a month, then you had 6 months, and then now you've had over a year. I'm with my friend right now who's a professor at a community college in New York, and she told me she had to pivot her classes to online in 4 days. So, this is probably these things that we pivoted that fast because we were forced to. These are things that we have needed to pivot for decades. My friends in the disability community have told me and told us, legislators, hey, we can work from home, hey, we can work from home. And everyone's like, no, you got to be in the office. No, you got to be in the office. Well, guess what we learned? Everybody can work from home. I am in Florida and I'm still working remotely. So it is possible. I've been working remotely for 15 years, so I didn't skip a beat, but everyone else had to pivot. And I just want you all to remember that when you think something isn't possible, the impossible will be possible. And we were forced to do so because Mother Nature had enough and asked us to stay home and give the planet a breath. So that is my perspective on COVID, which is probably very different from any other person you've heard. So with that, I'm probably going to take off in a few minutes so I can actually enjoy my vacation. But it's an honor and a pleasure to be here. And I love to speak at events. So if you need me, I'm available, okay?
Thank you so much, Senator. We really appreciate you joining us. And as for your advice to be loud, hopefully an outcome of this will be a clearer and louder voice with some good ideas to push for to advance this agenda. So thank you so much. Since we can't applaud, we'll sort of smile you out. Great. So Kathleen, let's go. Kathleen, let's go to you next.
Thank you. Yeah, and speaking of pivoting to Zoom, this last year was the first year that folks in Spokane were able to lobby their legislators in Olympia without having to drive 5 hours, 6 hours across the state. So that was definitely a welcome change for us and something that removed barriers for otherwise busy small business owners to be able to talk with their legislators. And definitely tips for how to get in touch with your legislators are very welcome as well. To your earlier question of how do you bring businesses that might have a hard time being green into that fold, how do you open that door for them? I have work that touches on that, and the part of the clean materials value chain that I work in is clean energy. And what I do is honestly very behind the scenes because it has to do with wastewater and sewage, which most community members don't want to know. They don't think very much about where their sewage goes. And that may not change whether it's going to, making clean energy or not. However, it does mean that they would be participating in it if a project is able to go through at a municipal level. But I can say that from my own experience, the ability to do a project on that scale has taken the efforts, the combined collaborative efforts of multiple small local businesses in Spokane. And it took about probably 3 years from the time that I moved to Spokane to be able to meet some of those businesses. That was before SIMBA existed. And since then, it's greatly accelerated. So really what I suggest as far as breaking down those barriers is let's fund business alliances like this and push that at the state level, as well as creating forums that leaders of business communities can link up and share knowledge like this, because again, that funding and bandwidth to have those kind of conversations is limited even among groups of businesses once they've gotten together.
I want to follow up a little bit on procurement and as these opportunities come, maybe it's government procurement, maybe it's a large business with a contract. Kathleen just spoke to, I think, some of the work that's required to support the ability of small businesses to sort of interface successfully with opportunity. What is, and it sounds to me as someone who's just learning in this space, like that interface around kind of larger procurement is a real challenge. Can anyone speak to kind of where we're at in that question? I like that Yumiko brought up this social procurement, which again, I didn't even know about until recently. But are there any sort of positive signs or in directions we should pursue to crack that nut? And let's start with Rochelle.
Thanks, Ted. From our perspective, it really is about the disconnect between even how small entities and large entities communicate about what their needs are. So no matter where you kind of come at it, whether it is a government entity or it's a large company, you kind of have to, as a smaller business, have to kind of figure out how they talk and exactly what they need, and where along the stages you can get in and talk to them early on in their process. Because a lot of these times the procurement cycles are not like a 6-month cycle. It maybe not even a month cycle. It's like years and years, especially with larger contracts. So the more that you can talk to those folks that are making those procurement decisions early on as they are creating even RFPs or those call for proposals or bids, the more likely that you're going to be able to get your product kind of I don't want to say written in as an option, but at least then you're at the table and that you can fulfill a portion of that contract. We just did a reverse pitch event, and the way that those works are having large entities basically say, this is what we do, what we need, and where small businesses or smaller entities can partner and how to do it. A big thing is, again, about the how. It depends on each company sometimes it depends on each sector within a piece of government. Like it varies very differently. So if we can get more of those folks at the table and get smaller entities in the room with them, always that's helpful, because again, that learning is vastly different than when you're working as a smaller business. You're much more nimble and quick. You have to be able to play the long game with those larger entities. And it takes a lot of time. It's not that quick turnaround that you're used to when you only have a smaller staff or smaller business.
Well, I hate to tear us away from this, because I think we could keep having this conversation for a long time, but we want to give a few minutes for people to get into breakouts and share their own ideas here about, just advice on how we might support this effort, as well as traps to avoid. So let's do that. And we're going to have a facilitator that I think is pre-assigned in each room. and would ask that someone volunteer to take notes and just email those to us, and we'll provide an address in the chat to do that. And we're going to do this fairly quickly, so we had hoped for 15, but why don't we take 10 minutes and have conversations around these two questions. What steps might we take to support micro enterprises' participation in the emerging clean materials economy, and/or what traps do we need to avoid? So let's go into breakouts. We'll call you back in 10 minutes and do some quick reporting out, and then we'll wrap up and send you on your way. So we've just got a few minutes left, so unfortunately we can't spend too much time at this, but what I'd like to do is just ask each of the 4 breakout rooms just for one observation. Just share us a quick observation, and the chat will, and you see Terry's email there on the slide. Please send whatever notes from those breakouts to Terry at that address. So very briefly, just give us one highlight of what you heard in the conversation there. Lisa, let's start with your group.
Yeah, just an incredible group of leaders in our breakout. One was to just demystify the process so small businesses can access these funding opportunities, be able to just expand ways of businesses to learn about these opportunities. And one really good suggestion was really explain the environmental impacts better so people can understand really what's at stake.
Right on. Moji, how about your group?
Yeah, so there are 3 main themes, and they're all interconnected, of course, but funding, making it just giving people money to do what they need to do, storage space, and then purchasing co-ops to get over the hump of minimum buying and just the power of group buying. So those are the 3 things that came up for us.
All right, thank you. Cherie?
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, we had a great group too. Themes came up were deep community listening, studying what the needs are based on what the people in the community need, having examples available, is also deep individualized support in the form of hand-holding, like really supporting people through the process.
Right on. And Nico?
Actually, I volunteered to do the reporting out for our group.
All right.
You want to let me go, Nico, or?
Yeah, take it away.
Go ahead, Mike.
The 2 things Mike pointed out, something he had also put in the chat, is that the procurement technical assistance centers, the PTAC, getting one of those government contracts can really make a business, but they are completely out of reach for 80–90% of businesses in America. And so if we could figure out a creative way to get these contracts to the really small businesses, that would be something. And then Jason, from his point of view, he's still pre-revenue and in that valley of death, and trying to set up a lab, trying to get commercial space so they can set up business and start hiring. So they're the key things, those manufacturing businesses need commercial space. And again, the repeated theme here is funding.
Right on. Well, thank you all, and look forward to getting those notes. And boy, there's a whole lot here to work with. Lisa, why don't I turn to you, and anything that you'd like to say as we wrap up here in terms of our intentions moving forward, and then I'll close us out.
Wonderful. Well, first of all, thank you for this opportunity. I learned so much, Ted. You're an awesome moderator, and thank you for your leadership. I want to just say once again, WSMA is here to support nonprofits that are really working with those smallest businesses. Are you a nonprofit? Do you work with small businesses? Join WSMA. It's not by accident that we have SIMBA, Center for Inclusive Entrepreneurship, Seattle Good Business Network, Refugee Artisans Initiative, Zero Waste Washington, Enterprise for Equity. All are nonprofits on this call helping the smallest businesses move green. And so really join us. We're going to be putting on a platform where these technical assistance providers are available to any business who puts in the information they need, and up will pop the providers that will help them along that path. we're grateful for that. Secondly, WSMA offers micro grants to organizations to get this work done. So please keep your attention on this good work. We also offer trainings like today. Next week, we're having a huge event on the power of cooperatives in this space. So just keep your eyes open for a work that we do. Finally, I just want to say thank you to the Department of Commerce and all of our partners on the ground. We could not do this without you and the policymakers at the top. Thanks.
Oh, thanks, Lisa. So today was the start of something, and we're going to digest everything we heard and think about where to go from here. But I know Lisa is very committed to forming a community of practice around this whole idea and this possibility. And everyone that registered for this event, you will be receiving an invitation to follow up opportunities to participate in this conversation. As you see here on the screen, we're going to continue this clean materials conversation, kind of diving into different subjects as we go, and then wrapping it all together in November. And hopefully, this will lead us to some solid ideas for how to respond to some of these needs and challenges that we heard today. So more to come. Thanks for kicking us off in such a helpful and substantive way. Thank you so much to Yumiko and Jesse for sharing your stories, for our panelists for bringing all of your experience and wisdom and care for the broader community to this. This is a really lovely thing to be a part of. Really appreciate the partnership with Clean Tech Alliance and the Micro Enterprise Association. And with that, we're going to send you on your way with maybe a minute to spare. So thank you, everybody, so much for joining this conversation today. And we hope to make lovely things happen moving forward. Have a great day.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you, everybody.